Oh yeah, we're back. We're back. And this one's going to be fun. We're going to be digging into habits, performance. We're going to dig into the woo woo, but also the science. All right, I got the one and only best-selling author of the book, Higher Self Habits, Alessia Citro. What's going on?
Thank you for having me. Man, I'm excited for this. And that is the first time I've ever been introduced as a bestseller, by the way. It's still like hot off the press.
Yeah, yeah. And how'd that feel? Just right off the bat, how does it feel to have that be part of your intro?
It is still a bit surreal, but I like it. I think we're going to
Okay.
keep it.
We're keeping it. Yeah, no one can take that away from you. You did it,
No.
right? So let's talk about this. Okay. Your book, Higher Self Habits, came out. Why'd you decide to write a book? And what is the book all about?
So Jake has the best follow-up game of anyone I've ever met. I met you 3 years ago now, I think, somewhere around there. And at the time, I wanted to write a completely different book, but we stayed in touch thanks to you. And last year, I finally knew what my book was going to be. So if you are someone who, like, maybe you've got multiple ideas floating around in your head, like I did, you know you're going to be an author. It's just a matter of, like, is this the book to write? Is it not? Is the timing right? The timing is never going to be right. But once you know what your book is, you just go for it. And I wouldn't have been able to like do that without you.
I love it.
So yeah.
I love it. And so talk to us about the book. You figured out the idea. What did the book end up becoming and what's it all about?
Okay. So the funny thing is, I thought I was writing a different book when I came to the event. I thought I was going to write a daily reader, which I'm definitely still going to do, where you read a quote every day. And then there's like my pep talk for you each and every day. I started outlining, and the book I actually began writing is the one that was published, Higher Self Habits. And it's the method that I created, well, on accident for myself to quit drinking, to get healthy, to be more present, to be happier, all the good, positive transformations in my life. And as we began outlining it, I'm like, oh, okay, daily readers on hold for now. This is the book I'm writing. And I also chose to write the book I did because it would help me from a business standpoint. I have a coaching program, and this really made me put my money where my mouth is and outline the whole thing and what I will also be teaching people. So it was like a two for one.
Definitely. And I love how you made that distinction. I remember, and so for everyone that's listening, we host a live event where we break down and help you build out your entire outline like in a weekend. And I remember when we were talking about this, you had these two ideas. And you ultimately decided to go with what became Higher Self Habits because of the business component, right? And I think that that's such an important part of the whole book writing process is identifying what is the outcome you aim to achieve based on the book. And often that will dictate which idea should come first or which idea you should put your time and effort and energy into. So as you were doing this, right, you had different ideas. We had been chatting for several years. Why did you decide that within the last year was the right time to actually commit to writing the book?
I love this question because you you're never going to feel like it's the right time. I mean, maybe some people do, like complete anomaly unicorn type of people, but I think for most, you never feel ready, you never feel qualified. And I had this epiphany the month before. I had been at Lindsay Schwartz's Powerhouse Women event. And sitting in that audience, I had the realization the time is never going to be right. I just need to act as this person I want to be right freaking now and make the future come to me by doing so. So I wasn't ready. I just knew it was kind of like now or never. And so off we went.
And so as you were writing it, okay, you got off to an incredibly hot start. What was your
Yeah.
writing process like? Why were there some parts that you were super quick on? Why were there some parts that took you a little longer? Walk me through some of that because I think it's important to note that every person's going to have a little bit different of a journey. Some people are really hot from the start and then it gets a little more difficult. Other people it takes them a little while to ramp up, but then they hit their stride and they go. So what was kind of your writing experience like as you went through the process?
The reason is the same reason why I needed to write a book about habits and go into this because I really balk at structure and discipline and all of that. And so when something is fun, it's hard to peel me away from it. And this started out being really fun. I mean, no joke, I wrote, I think it was like 18,000 words in 3 days, which for context might be half of a person's book. It ended up being about a third of mine. So that was the first 3 days. And then it got really difficult. And the reason it got difficult is because, well, a couple of things. One, I'm an avid reader. And so I had been doing a lot of outsourcing of my authority. Like, well, so and so says this, and I read this in this book. And it sounded like, as my editor put it later, a cacophony of voices. So I began to realize that after the initial feeling of like the dam breaking. And then I'm like, okay, wow, I need to go deep and talk about like, what do I think? And like,
Hmm.
take the full ownership of like, this is my opinion. This is what has worked for me versus sort of hiding behind the expertise of other people. And I
Yep.
think that's probably pretty common for first time authors. It's like, who am I to be writing a book on, behavioral science or teaching or, whatever your specialty is? You still are going to feel the imposter syndrome. So that made it hard. And then just finding a way to make, I mean, the subtitle of the book is the scientific, strategic, and spiritual framework to get out of your own way for good. How could I make the scientific part of it fun without reading like a textbook? So that's also where it got difficult. But you know what? I think everyone should write a book if for no other reason than to just experience the personal development program on steroids that authoring a book provides.
Definitely, definitely. And it was in the beginning of your writing journey. I think it's kind of a really cool thing when you talk about it that way because you started off really executing and just letting it all out. But I think for every author, there's a moment in their writing experience where they're like, "Holy shit! Like I'm actually doing it." Right? And then it's about, okay, if I'm actually doing it, then I need to actually make it the right way, not the way that I just get words on paper and call it a book. You become like embossed into it, right? It becomes a part of you and it becomes a part of your future identity. And you kind of step into that as you're writing it. So I found that to be really, really interesting for you in the process. But you kept showing up, you followed the process, one step at the next, and you would have never gotten to that realization if you delayed and tried to predict or preview that space. You had to actually do the work to get to the point where you had all the puzzle pieces to say, okay, we're missing some edges, we're missing some pieces. Let's now evaluate, adjust, and keep going.
Yes. And, the definition of insanity gets used a lot, right? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And I tend to be a person that thinks 10 steps ahead, which that sounds like an advantage and it can be, but it could also be a disadvantage. Because if you think, let's say that you've got the idea for the book and you're already worrying about how you're going to launch it and like how to publish it on Amazon, you're never going to start. So I'm like, let me try something a little bit different. Let me just look like 1 to 2 steps ahead and worry about the rest as it comes, which is probably why my launch had delays and setbacks. But like, who cares? The book got done and I was able to not get wrapped around the axle with stuff I didn't need to be worrying about yet. I could just experience and learn as I went, which was a valuable lesson in and of itself.
And you mentioned, along with the lines of lessons, you mentioned that this was a personal development experience on steroids for you, right? Like writing this book was a personal development adventure of a lifetime. What were some of the lessons that you learned about yourself as you went through this process, that was emphasized and exaggerated through writing a book?
Okay, so the biggest one is that, like most people, I love initiating things. I love starting projects. Finishing them, however, can prove to be a bit more difficult for me, just the way I'm wired. And this proved to me once and for all, I can see things through. I can execute. I can get it done. And ultimately, I'm really proud of the finished product. I mean, do I think it's the best book ever written? No. Hopefully it'll be the best book that, the person who needs it has ever read, but at the end of the day, it's like no matter what happens, I finished it. I achieved what I came to achieve, which was to become a bestseller and to get this message out there. And like you said in the beginning, like no one can take that away from me. So that was the
Mm.
biggest thing. It's like I can do hard things and I can finish what I freaking start.
Yeah, I mean that's that's a big lesson. You know, like I think it's early in your journey to see because the book's so fresh. But for me, doing it 4 times and working with hundreds of people, the that lesson that you just shared is going to translate into so many areas of your life because of that, right? And you will always be able to now have a new frame of reference when it comes to what difficult or what hard is and what you're willing to do or not do to determine if something's worth it. And I think that that's going to be like a really powerful thing for you and for everyone that's listening is like when I make decisions now, I could say, well, I know how hard it was to do this. Where does this compare on that spectrum? And is it worth it for the result that I'm looking to achieve? And this is your first of hopefully several books. This is
Several.
your book that's going to spark the next level of unlocking your coaching and everything. And so let's dig into the book. Okay. I'm a habits guy. I think writing a book is a lot about setting up the right systems and creating the right habits or having the right team around you in order to be able to actually achieve something. I don't believe writing a book is just, hey, let's write a book and it's done. I believe it's about breaking it down into the incremental stages of doing what's possible and what's achievable to then keep you coming back. So let's talk about habits. It's strategic, scientific, spiritual. How in the world have you figured out the way to blend all of those things together?
Oh, well, I am such an avid reader. I quit drinking 2 years ago and I joke that I traded booze for books. So I read 48 books last year, my first full year of being completely sober. What I found in reading, because I don't read like, and no offense to anyone who does, but like reading smut books and like fantasy, like that's not my thing. I like to read neuroscience, spiritual stuff, quantum physics, light, easy reads. What I noticed in reading these books, especially the ones on habits, which, fantastic books like BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, Atomic Habits by James Clear, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, all these books, wonderful books. However, what I found is that they and most personal development books that have the science component to it of like the structure and here's what you do and here's, how to do it, they lack the spiritual side of things, why it
Mm,
actually matters and why it connects deep into you on a soul level, right?
mm,
And so I'm like, why has this gap not been bridged? There's so much more to this than just like how to create a habit that will last. That's great, but why does that matter? And why does it matter not only to me, but to the greater good, to the collective? And so that's what I did with this book. It's like, hey, you want to become your higher self, the best version of you. Yeah. What does that mean from like a business standpoint for you, from how you're going to feel about yourself, but also what are the waves you are going to create by showing up that way in the world
mm,
day in, day out? Like, how is that going to impact your partner, your children, the person you meet in the grocery store who maybe they were having a horrific day and your act of kindness, your energy turned it around?
mm.
So that's why I threw it all into one. And it's been working for me. And I'm excited to see how it affects all the people who read it.
Now, does this book, right? You mentioned some other habits books and how we're differentiating, how you putting your unique spin on it, which I love, by the way. I'm going to go on a side note here. I love the way you also just said what you just said, which is these are great books, and you're not taking anything away from those books by writing your own, but you're putting an absolutely new spin on an industry that has great books already. And that just means there's more opportunity for you because it's a market that's in high demand. People are loving these books. And now you have a perspective that there are not very many that come from your vantage point, and there are zero that come from your story's vantage point. And that's a really, really powerful thing. So, what's been your process that you figured out accidentally that now is in this book that we're going to be able to learn about when we grab a copy?
Oh, I love this question. And also, like, just underscoring what you said. Yes, yes, yes. If there are other books on what you want to talk about, that's just proof that there's a market for it. So go for it. So the process that I accidentally created, I called the Higher Self Habits Method, and it has 5 stages. The first is awareness. You have to become aware of a problem or whatever it is that is in your way, or you can't do anything about it. The next is alignment, where you get crystal clear on who it is that you know you were created to be. And you get to know that version of you so well that it almost becomes like the angel on your shoulder. It's like this
Mm,
invisible advisor to you. And it's like, okay, am I going to do this or no? What would my higher self do? Right. The third stage is auditing, which is way more fun than it sounds. And that's where I take you through a framework of how to figure out where to start in the journey and what might actually be the issue that you need to improve and firm up so that you can ascend without, constantly backpedaling and transgressing and feel like you're playing whack-a-mole, right? If you've ever felt like you're playing whack-a-mole in your life, like one area is great, the rest are falling to pieces, and then it shifts, I will help you to stop doing that. The fourth stage is activation, where we put it all to work. The rubber meets the road. I show you how to design habits. And that's where like the very structural, strategic part comes in because there is an actual recipe and science to it. And as soon
mm.
as you know that, it's like you become unshackled. And then the fifth stage is ascension and amplification. You rise up to this new level, you begin to amplify that energy, radiate it out into the world, and then the process starts over. It is an upward spiral, no more downward spirals. You become aware of new levels to unlock, and the process starts over.
I love it. 5 stages, higher self method. Boom. Easy.
Boom.
Let's go.
Trademark
Okay.
pending.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot here because as a habits person, I've tried everything. And I'm also a naturally highly disciplined person. So if I want to do something, I will commit to it and I will execute, sometimes to a fault. Okay. But there's about being healthy and there's about being the person in your highest self who also has habits. It's not just the person who has habits. And I think that that's a huge thing that we get wrong in this personal development world is it's habits and routine at all cost, not necessarily living though in your highest self.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to put this onto you here, Alessia, and I want to talk about a business habit and I want to talk about a personal habit that we could do it. It's a hypothetical, but one of the things that I see most people, most entrepreneurs, they have great intentions to reach out to prospects or network. They have great intentions to do those things because they know if they're not talking to prospects, they're not making money, right?
Yeah.
But the number one thing that disappears or gets skipped over or gets replaced on a calendar is time for prospecting and time for networking. I see this over and over and over again. Yet everybody knows it's one of the most important things you can do. So my question to you would be, if we wanted to be honest and stay consistent with this and build this habit of showing up for ourselves to network on a more consistent basis, how would we go through your 5-step process to build that habit?
Oh, I love this question. Okay, you're kind of taking me back to my tech sales days too, where my VP of sales that I initially worked for, he said, you treat prospecting as if it's an appointment. Otherwise, you're going to go like a roller coaster, up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay, so in the book, I ask the reader, think of a habit you're having a hard time sticking to. So in this case, prospecting daily, and ask yourself, WTF, where is the friction? What's making it hard to do? Perhaps what's making it hard to do is that you don't have messaging that you can go to readily. Maybe you need to sit down and script out or write, a copy and paste message that you can tweak a little bit to make that more regular. Because if you're handwriting all of it or coming up with it off the cuff every day, yeah, that's probably kind of exhausting and it's making it more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one example. Maybe another place the friction could be is you don't know who the heck you're reaching out to. So maybe you need, man, I'm really going back to my tech sales days right now. Maybe you need to map out who am I calling on tomorrow at the end of each day. So look at where is the friction? What is actually making it difficult to do? If it's a mindset thing, maybe you think you're annoying by prospecting. Okay. How can you put a new spin on that? How can you shift the perspective to eliminate that friction? So that's the number one question you ask yourself with anything that will not stick. I don't care if it's using your cell phone when you wake up in the morning or if it's prospecting. What is making this thing you say you want to do hard to do? Where is the friction? WTF?
Okay, perfect. I'm just taking some notes over here while
I
we're getting
love
this
it.
going. All right, so let's keep going here. Let me. I'm going to switch to another habit. Okay, there are, in my opinion, I'm kind of making this up on the spot, but
Yeah.
there are habits that are aspirational habits, and there are like daily, like needed habits. Okay, let me give you an example of those. An aspirational habit for me would be, at this point in my life, I just started playing golf, and I have an aspiration to be better at golf. So part of my habits that I'd like to improve upon is consistent repetition and showing up to play golf more frequently. But knowing what to do and where to do it, that's my WTF. The daily, mundane, like regular habit that I would have to execute, and in an example of this, that's not aspirational, like I want to get towards something, but just a daily habit of cooking food, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
making a meal or meal prepping, right? Those
Yep.
are those are things that are needed on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis versus the aspirational habit. Again, I'm just making up these terminologies, but the aspirational habit of something that you aspire to be, right? So it's
Yep.
going to add, it's going to be benefit, it's fun. When you look at these different types of habits, do you feel that they all follow the same pattern, or do you feel like there's more spiritual on one side or more of one phase of your method than the other that you need to pay attention to when creating a certain habit?
Great question. I really think that they are part and parcel. They're the same thing.
Okay.
So the aspirational ones are more fun, right? Because, the idea of becoming a great golfer and, being on the course like Tiger Woods, that's very fun and exciting. Meal prepping is probably not exciting, right? Unless you tie it to a greater aspiration of something like, I want to have a six pack. I want to have the best energy I've ever had in my life so that I can keep up with my crazy child that never stops moving, something like that. You got to have a bigger why to make it a bit more enticing and exciting. However, having said that, you do want to take motivation out of the equation as much as possible. And what I mean by that is you might be real motivated to go to the gym on January 1st and not so much come February 1st, right? So you have to structure your habits in a way that makes them very easy to do. Because again, WTF, where's the friction? If you have any at all, the odds of you continuing to do it are not great. So, like in the golf example, if you want to go hit balls at the driving range every single day, you'd better find a driving range that is kind of within the reach of your current routine, close to your house, not too far away to drive, or it's going to be too big of a lift. You're not going to do it. With meal prepping, you're probably not going to do that if you don't know how to cook, if you don't have the proper kitchen tools, if you don't know what to make. So, if you dissect these bigger habits, so like meal prepping, and you break it down into tasks, how can you simplify and remove the friction in each component? Like, how can you make it easier to plan out the meals that you actually want to make? How can you make it easier when you go to the grocery store? Are there kitchen tools that you could buy one time to save you hours and hours and hours compounded over time? Looking at it that way as how you can make things easier and fit them within your current
Mm,
routine. Because if
mm,
it's too far outside, you're not going to do it. And then
yeah.
starting really small. If you order DoorDash every night, maybe set a goal of prepping one meal a week. Don't try to do the whole shebang because then you're gonna fail and you're gonna feel bad about yourself and then
How
do nothing.
important how important do you believe identity is when habits, in terms of assuming the identity before you actually have that identity of someone who does those things versus becoming the actual identity by doing the thing that you say you're going to do or want to do?
I think that those two things go hand in hand, but identity is paramount. Paramount. The example I give in the book, I don't drink anymore. That's like a newer development in the last couple years. Before that, I was a wine dealer. How have I shifted from going from someone who's selling wine to not drinking it? I shifted my identity. When I go out, it's not, oh, I can't drink. It's, I don't drink. I am
Hmm.
not a drinker. My identity shifted. So if you want to get better at golf, you now identify as a golfer. What does a golfer do? Do they have clubs in their trunk to make it easier to go to the range when they drive by it? Yep. If you are someone who really prioritizes their health, are you going to McDonald's on the way home, or do you have something that you can grab out of the fridge when you get there because you planned ahead? Right? It's like it's changing the identity, and then it is continually acting in alignment with that version of you. Even when you feel like a complete imposter, a complete fraud, when you feel like it's a pipe dream, you just keep showing up as if you are them. And before you know it, you are.
Okay, this is good. All right, I'm digging into this because I really enjoy talking about this stuff. When you're building a habit, okay, and obviously there are different levels of habits, levels of seriousness, levels of fun, levels of all these things. But when you're trying to either build a habit or stop doing a habit, right? There's always that, what if I mess up? What if I skip a day? What if I screw up? What if I don't do it? Or what if I do it? And how do you find, because what happens is when that happens, you get the guilt. Okay? You start getting the guilt and you start to wonder and get confused about like, oh shoot, I messed up, therefore I'm not going to achieve this thing. Or I'm not, the habit's not for me. Let me just stop trying altogether. How do you handle that or encourage people when they're in the process of building a habit or stopping a habit? How do you encourage them to persevere when they make a mistake or they don't do the thing that they need to do?
Okay. I love this question because I struggle with it personally. I actually have a chapter in the book called All or Nothing is Your Achilles Heel. So once I was on a weight loss journey and I was following it to the letter, like the meals I was eating, they were weighed out. The macros were freaking perfect. And then I had one cheat meal, and guess what happened? Oh, I ate like crap. What's the point? And I completely stopped. So now, luckily, that's been a few years ago. I have evolved since then. You got to get this all or nothing. If I can't do it perfect, it's not worth doing out of your mind. Because if you feel like you need to have everything dialed in order to be successful with something, you're going to never do anything. Perfection is not real, it is an illusion. So, a couple ways that you can prevent this from happening. The first thing is make it as small as possible. I use this example and it's kind of embarrassing, but again, I wrote the book that I needed. Historically, I have struggled to wash my face at night. I just don't feel like doing it. I'm too tired. I just want to go to bed. So, what's making that hard to do? Where's the friction, right? Maybe there's too many steps in the routine. So, what would be something small, incremental? Maybe it's just using a face wipe. That's better than nothing, right? Start small. And then when you do it, you celebrate yourself. Doesn't mean you go on a shopping spree or no, you immediately, when you remember to do it or right afterwards, like milliseconds, think of like how you would react if you were to throw a wadded up paper ball into the trash can and sink it. What's that little celebration you do? Do that for yourself when you actually do the tiny habit that you say you wanted to do. And then you're going to keep building on that because your brain is wired to crave dopamine. That is why you go on Instagram without consciously thinking about it, why you love watching TV, why you love buying something on Amazon. We love dopamine. Okay. We're all addicted to it in some way, shape, or form. So you can use this to your advantage by celebrating when you do the tiny thing. It wires it in as pleasurable, and your brain is going to say, ooh, what was I just doing to get that hit? And you're going to be more likely to wash your face and add in all the steps or whatever it is that you don't want to do currently. You're going to be able to pick that habit up by celebrating yourself and by keeping it tiny to start with.
Mm,
Small is mighty. No more go big or go home.
mm. Do you have rapid fire question for you? Do you have like after doing all your research and living it and going through it, do you have a certain number of habits that you would recommend, advise, or even discourage people from doing at one time when it comes to them wanting to make changes?
Oh, yeah. What a good question. You're asking lots of good questions. And I'm not just flattering you. I mean it. I would
Thank you.
say like don't start out with more than maybe like three little ones at a time. And I would have them be varied. So think of ones that are like really mundane that you're probably ignoring because you feel like they're too small to matter, like taking your vitamins every morning. Like that does matter. You're going to do that day in, day out. It'll be a foundation of your health and it's going to improve your confidence to add in more. And then maybe your other one is like walking to your mailbox and back as like a baseline habit. If you want to go for a longer walk, you can do it. But like pick ones that aren't exactly alike and that give you a little bit of variety. Also, so that you can see what you're vibing with and more inclined to versus not. And then you
Mm,
can troubleshoot a bit more effectively too.
I love it. I love it. All right, as we get ready for the last couple of minutes here, I want to go to the present day of your identity and where you're going. This book process for you was an incredible adventure. There were ups, there were downs. You learned a lot, you experienced a lot, you made a lot of waves throughout this process. You've learned a lot about yourself. Now that your book is launched, people all over the world are reading it, you're getting reviews, you hit bestseller status, like things are shifting and things are starting to change. What are you currently feeling as somebody whose book is just out? They haven't experienced the full thing of the book, but it's out. You've experienced the launch. What are you currently feeling? How does it actually feel being in this position?
It's honestly a bit surreal. I almost feel like I'm in like a dream, but I keep reminding myself, no, like this is life now. And like you did this thing that against all odds you pulled off. You know, I got the flu the day of the launch. You were supposed to be there at the party that I had to cancel early that morning. Oh my gosh. But I launched it anyway and it still hit bestseller. So I'm using that and all the other pieces of this coming to fruition as evidence that I do have what it takes. I am on my way to becoming the person that I know I was created to be and falling in love with the process, not getting so hung up with the destination. I talk about this in the book, but like you actually release more dopamine en route to a goal than you do once you've achieved it. And so it's like, well, what's the next thing I'm going after? Like, let's just
Yeah,
keep being in process. Like, let's just keep enjoying the journey. I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. So I think with that attitude, wherever I go from here, I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to take it
amazing.
as evidence that I'm living my best life and just see how high I can go.
Amazing, amazing. And you mentioned early on in this conversation that part of the reason why you chose to create this book in the first place was because you knew it could create business opportunities. And that is now, when we look ahead, one of your big focuses. So what do you now hope? You've launched the book, you've been focused on the launch, really driving awareness, exposure, opportunities. Where do you want to take this thing? And where do you see, and how are you going to be able to help people who want to make these massive transformations?
Well, my whole life, I have been a leader. I've been a coach, even though I wasn't getting paid to coach, right? That's just how I'm built. And so now that I've got the book, I know it works. I've had people in like a pilot program that are getting great results. I feel qualified and ready to help take as many people to the next level as are ready for it. So
Mm-hmm.
I envision a thriving community of people who are wanting to chase down their very best self and have fun while doing it. And I don't think I would have had the confidence in doing that had I not seen this through and come out the other side. So if you're interested in being a better version of yourself and having a damn good time while doing it, we should probably be friends.
Awesome. How can we support you, follow you, learn more about you, buy the book? Tell us where to go.
So I am most active on Instagram. So you can follow me over there. It's Alessia Citro, Alessia Citro, and two underscores, because believe it or not, there are other Alessia Citros. Couldn't get the thing without the underscore. You can also head to my website, alessiacitro.com/book for the book, /programs for all the coaching programs I do. And then I also have a quiz that you can take. It's alessiacitro.com/quiz. You can find your habits, spirit animal, and how you might be wired to create habits. And I'll help you through that based on your inclinations.
I love it. That's amazing. We'll get that all linked up. Alessia, thank you for coming on the show. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you through this experience, watching everything from the follow-ups before you joined to the live event to now celebrating you as a best-selling author. This is amazing.
I couldn't have done it without you. I mean that truly. It has been such a joy to work with you. And I just love your approach too. Like you're so like direct, but in a loving way. And yeah, I think if I hadn't had you, that we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Like the book would never have been out. And so from the bottom of my heart, I'm very, very grateful.
Appreciate you saying that. And so for everybody that just listened to this, here's my challenge to you. Here's my challenge to you. Identify one habit. It could be the smallest thing in the world, the most mundane thing in the world, or the biggest thing in the world that you've been knowing in your heart you want to change, add, subtract, or whatever. I want you to identify that one thing. I want you to choose the habit that's associated with that thing. And then I want you to execute on it. I want you to build it. And if you need help doing that, you have somebody. You have the book, Higher Yourself Habits, and you have Alessia to reach out to if you need additional support or want additional support. But that is my challenge to you. Find the thing that you know is calling you. Make that thing your identity and get after creating the habit around that task. So that's what we got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you on the next one.